All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we're going to learn about a career as an immigration attorney. And we have attorney Danielle Perez to share us her journey to become an attorney. And before that, let's do a check-in. Make sure you check in so that your teachers know that you're here. And if you have questions, this is a great questions document that you can reference to, and the evaluation form. This is how we track your attendance and give you credit for attending this event. If the QR codes doesn't work or the bit.ly link, we have it, we'll post it in the chat so you can just click on the link. Be fully present, pay attention. This is the time that you can ask questions about this career. You can turn on your camera. You can raise your hand if you have a question, or just put it in the chat. And again, the evaluation form, this is how we give you your attendance, give you a credit, and then it's a requirement for you to graduate in Oregon. And let's have attorney Danielle to share.
Okay. So my name's Danielle Perez. I'm an immigration attorney here in Hillsborough. So the way I got started in immigration specifically is kind of a longer story. So I knew that I wanted to be an attorney when I was like 7. I didn't really know what it meant. I just know that I had seen things on TV, and I like to argue with my siblings. And so people said that would be a good skill for me, or a good field for me to go into. And then as I got older, I just kind of started to see people around me that needed legal help, that weren't able to get the best legal help because they couldn't afford it. So I wanted to be able to provide that kind of help. I started off, so to become an attorney, I had to graduate high school, 4 years of undergrad. You can study whatever you want, from like science to art, politics. I specifically studied psychology and criminal justice. And then I went to law school. While I was in law school, I was working at a firm that had a contract to represent young people that were accused of committing crimes, and helping families where the children were taken out of the home. And so after I graduated from law school, I got hired on at that firm. And I was working with this clientele of juvenile cases, and it crossed over into all kinds of different areas. So I got to learn about criminal law. I got to learn about family law. And I also got to learn about immigration. So as far as being an attorney, people can be general and do anything from like landlord and tenant to criminal stuff to family law. But a lot of people tend to specialize in one area, so that they know the ins and outs and they don't miss any details in that area specifically. And when I was ready to make a transition out of juvenile, I had come across some immigration related cases, and I found that to be interesting. I wanted to move into a field where I thought I was helping people. There are definitely some fields that I don't, in my opinion, I don't feel that it's really about the goal of like helping people kind of in the bigger aspect of things. And I wanted to do something that I felt like I was making an impact, and I was really helping to change people's lives. And so I was looking, I was fortunate enough to transition into immigration. And so when I started immigration, I actually learned from somebody who had been practicing immigration for about 30 something years. So I learned from the best, which I'm very grateful for, because immigration is very fact specific. So that's how I ended up getting into immigration. And so I've been focusing on immigration only for the last 10 years. I've been an attorney for going on 15 years, and 10 of those years has been specifically with regard to immigration. When I say immigration, what I'm meaning is I'm helping people either come and visit the United States for a temporary visit, or to like go to school. But I'm also talking about helping people to come to the United States or stay in the United States to live permanently. Like this is where they want to make their home. I don't do any immigration outside. So people that maybe want to go to Canada or Europe or South America, I don't work with any of those other countries because they have very specific laws with regard to letting people in and out. I only focus on US immigration. So that's kind of how I got into it. I personally am bilingual. And so I speak English and I speak Spanish. A lot of my clients are Spanish speaking. You can do immigration or other areas of law and not speak the language. There are a lot, specifically in the Portland area, there are a lot of access to like interpreter services so that you can communicate with clients that speak other languages. I personally find that it's easier to connect and communicate as needed with my clients because I can speak Spanish. So I don't have to stop and get an interpreter on the phone or get a document translated. We're able to do that in-house. But language is definitely not a requirement to do what I do. And so as far as kind of day to day, I don't have to do a lot of court work. I do a lot of my cases are handled here in the office. And so what I do is we have an intake system. So anytime that I have a new client that calls and wants our assistance, we do a brief questionnaire to get some basic facts so that I can determine whether or not that I can help them. Immigration is very fact specific. And if you you change a date of birth or you change, if somebody's married or single, it really does change the whole dynamic of the case. And so there's anything with the law is you have to pay attention to the details because you can miss a deadline or you can miss an eligibility requirement, things like that. And you just don't want to make those kinds of mistakes, which is part of why we have our intake system to make sure that we're gathering the information we're going to need to determine if we can help a person. And then if we feel that we can help them, then I'll sit down with the person and go over their history, review things to make sure that I don't miss anything. Attention to detail is very, very important in what I do in other areas of the law because it can make or break your case. And then I'll also take the time to explain to the clients the process that will take them through and how I'm going to help them achieve their goals. There is a lot of communication that happens in this area of work because I communicate both verbally and in written form. And I want to make sure that I am communicating in a way that people can understand me. So we're dealing with some very complicated processes that don't necessarily make a lot of sense to people outside of immigration. And so I really want to make sure that my clients understand what's happening throughout the process. So I try to break it down into simpler terms. That's one of the ways that I know that I've been able to really master immigration. I understand is that I can break it down into a simple term. So you can think about something that maybe whether it's a sport or one of the classes that you're into, like, do you know that subject well enough that you could explain it to somebody that has no idea, that maybe has never played soccer or doesn't know about Roman history or whatever your subject matter is? Do you know it well enough that you could break it down to like a 5-year-old? So that's really why communication is important, is to be able to know how to communicate higher level concepts to people so that they understand. I'm getting paid to provide a service. And the reason that a lot of people do pay me is because they don't want to worry about the process. They don't want to worry about understanding those things, which is fine. But I also want to make sure that my clients know what we're doing and what I'm taking them through, because there'll come a point where they're going to have to answer questions about their history and their story for the process. And so I want to make sure that they understand those different pieces of the case. So I'll meet with the client, and then if we decide to move forward, it's a mutually agreed upon. They agree and I agree that we're going to move forward, and we'll prepare a case that we present in writing. So a lot of immigration is presented in writing. So that's why writing skills are important. Two classes I didn't like were my speech class and my writing class. And those are the two things that I probably use the most. And I have realized that it doesn't matter what kind of occupation somebody has, whether they're working in retail at like a Target or they're the CEO of like, say, Apple, you are going to have to communicate both in writing and verbally. And so those are two skills that I always recommend to people to, even though maybe you don't like those classes, take those classes into practice, because you're going to have to be able to communicate with somebody else. And so that's definitely something that I do, is communication, both written, whether it's an email, whether it's verbal, a phone call, whether it's in an in-person meeting, or it's writing a letter to immigration. So I have found that it's very important to build those skills. I'll present a lot of my arguments or explain why my clients are eligible for the benefit that they're seeking in writing. So I'll provide a letter that explains, like, there's 5 eligibility points for this, and this is point 1, this is why they qualify, 2, 3, and so on and so on. I would say maybe 30% of my cases will have an interview that's local here in Portland that I'll attend with my clients. The other 70% will have an interview that's outside the country that I won't attend. And that's why going back to communicating with my clients, for them to understand the process, because they'll have to answer those questions without me being present. So that's kind of generally our process, and we will see a case from start to finish, all the way into helping people get their green cards or become citizens of the United States. As far as kind of what a normal day, it's different every day, because there's different projects that we're working on. Some of our cases are really simple and can take maybe like 20 minutes to prepare a form, and other cases can take hours. Like, I'm currently in the middle of a case right now where I need to present some facts as to why family members would suffer if the immigrant could not stay in the United States, and I'm on page 12. Which there'll probably be another good like 8 pages or so before I'm done. And so obviously writing something like that is going to take more time to prepare than filling out a form that maybe takes me 20 minutes to fill out. Some skills, like I said, communication, attention to details, knowing how to ask good questions, because a lot of, whether it's filling out a form or it's presenting, these hardship things about like how people would, their family would change if we took out a family member, it's knowing how to ask questions of these people that I'm working with. I can ask a very simple question like, what is your name? People would think that's an obvious, simple question. But a lot of times people will give me like a nickname. So maybe the person's name is Susan and they'll tell me their name is Susie. Because this is a legal process, we have to provide their legal name. And so I need their name that's on their birth certificate. Well, I've learned over the years that I have to ask questions like clarifying, like, no, what is your name on your birth certificate? What does your driver's license say? What does your passport say? And so you can ask a question, but the person doesn't always understand it. And so you need to ask questions maybe in 3 or 4 different ways to get the answer, in order to make sure that you're presenting all of the true information. People aren't necessarily trying, at least for me in this field, I don't think that people are lying to me or are hiding information. I just don't think that they understand necessarily what I'm asking for, which is why I present the question in 3 or 4 different ways, so that I can get the information that I need. Oftentimes what happens is that they'll give one answer, and if there isn't any follow-up, we could rely on that information and it may not be correct, and it could definitely affect the case. So it's very important for us to ask questions and to have open communication with our clients. It also involves a level of trust, of being able to know how to work with people. Some people maybe had a bad experience with another attorney. Some people, their cases, we have to talk about some sensitive things that have happened in their lives. And sometimes we're getting into some of those hard conversations within, after knowing me for maybe an hour. And so I have to be aware of who I'm talking to and what I'm trying to get out of them, because we are talking about some sensitive stuff sometimes. But it's always important to get as much information so that we're providing the truth, because we don't want immigration to think that we're lying to them. And so this can also be true in other areas of the law that I've experienced, like juvenile or criminal. It's always important to have all the true information so you can present the best case possible. And it really does involve being patient, knowing how to communicate with people, and asking a lot of questions. It's taken time to learn how to ask these questions or learn how to work with clients. Over the years, it's kind of some of these things that ends up being trial and error. You learn from one case, like, oh, I should ask this question. I should ask it this way because I'm finding that more people are providing the more responsive answers when I ask it this way versus when I ask it. So for instance, I need to know if somebody has a criminal history, if they've ever had contact with the police. If I ask them if they have a criminal history, I would say probably about 7 out of 8 out of 10 people will tell me no. But if I ask them if they've ever had contact with the police, now I'm going to get more people to say yes. And it's not that the way that I phrased it before, they were lying to me. It's that they're thinking something that's open. For whatever reason, when I phrase criminal history, they think that it's an open case. And so they'll tell me no, because they don't have an open case. But if I ask them if they've ever had police contact, they're more likely to tell me, oh, there was this one time, 2 years ago that I got pulled over because of my tail light, or, oh, there was this one incident at Fred Meyer. And so I've just learned that asking the question about police contact tends to give me more responsive answers than just a blanket criminal history. And just learning, again, that, as I've talked about, is to explain things simply. I want to, because it's legal and there's a lot of consequences to what I'm explaining, I want to make sure that I'm using precise terms. However, they don't mean a lot to clients sometimes. And so I have to break it down without taking away from the meaning when I'm writing them letters and talking about immigrating or talking about maybe immigration violations. I don't want to take away and have them walk away with a misunderstanding by using too simple terms, but I also want them to understand what it is that we're talking about. So let's see. Any day can be different from highly like face-to-face client meetings. And so sometimes I'm in 6 or 7 meetings with clients, and some days I don't meet with anybody, but I do a lot of writing and preparing cases. So that's part of the reason that I like immigration, is that it gives me a variety. There's definitely a lot of different things that I can explore. So it's not like the same thing over and over to where I get bored. Every case is slightly different because we're dealing with individuals and they have different life stories and different facts. So that also keeps it interesting, because I'm able to, there's constantly something new, constantly something different. Each case is a puzzle. Also, because I want to make sure that I'm fitting them into the right category to get them the best benefits possible. How many cases do I take? So immigration is what we call cyclical. So that happens like they'll in stages. So a typical case that I have is probably like in 3 stages. So I can't move obviously to stage 2 until I do stage 1. And so I'll do stage 1, and then that'll take about 6 months before we can move to stage 2. And then that'll take maybe another 3 months, and then we'll move to stage 3. The reason I bring that up is because different cases are in different stages. I can have a variety of clients, like open cases. Right now, I probably have over 200 open cases, but I'm not working on all of those open cases. I'm probably actively working on about 20 of those cases, meaning that there's things that need to be done like on a day-to-day basis on those cases. So, and then as far as new cases, sometimes I'll only get like 10 new cases a month. And then like this month, I have probably about 25 new cases. And that's just kind of determined as far as people coming to us when they're ready to move forward. And so then let's see, what was the other one? One of the cases that I'm most proud of is I had a case because it challenged me. It was an asylum case. And so this individual was afraid to go back home because to his home country because of some of the things that had happened before he came. And it took a long time for me to create a relationship with that client for him to tell me that story because that was not something that he immediately told me. And so he was on the verge of getting deported. And at that point, he started to feel comfortable with me to start sharing some of the things that had happened. And we were able to get asylum for him so that he did not get deported and get returned home. And so there was just, because of the time that we spent working on the case and some of the intimate details I needed to work with that client, we were able to kind of create a close relationship. And we were able to accomplish his goal of not getting deported. And that case probably took about 3 years to complete. So and we thought we had lost the case, and then these things started to unfold, and so we were able to win it last minute. So that was one of my cases I'm most proud of, is that we were able to accomplish his goal and help him stay here in the United States. Let's see, have I ever needed to tell one that you can't take their case? Actually, I have. So there's a lot of areas of the law where the person just wants the legal advice. They were in a car accident, and so they want to get money from the insurance, or they want to get divorced. They're in trouble, they have some criminal charges, so they need help. With immigration, people can want to get their green card or get citizenship, but the law may not allow me to help them. That's why we do that screening process where I'm asking them questions to learn a little bit about their story, because there are certain requirements that must be met in order for somebody to receive the immigration benefit they're requesting. If they don't meet those requirements, they cannot get the immigration benefit. It doesn't matter how much they want to get the immigration benefit. If they don't qualify, they don't qualify. And so there are a handful of people that I have to tell them that I can't help them. However, there are a lot of people, unfortunately, out there that take advantage of immigrants and tell them that there's something that can be done in their case if they pay them like $5,000, when it's not technically true, or they don't tell them the whole story. Maybe a family can get started on stage 1, but they can't, because there's going to be problems in stage 2 or 3. They won't see the case to the end and get the benefit that they're requesting. So for cases that I can't help, I do offer them opportunity to meet with me so that I can explain to them how immigration actually works and explain to them why I cannot help them, so that they don't get taken advantage of by somebody else. But I do have to tell them that unfortunately we can't meet their goals. Let's see, what was the next one after that? On average, how long does a case take? So it's going to depend on the immigration benefit. The fastest cases right now are taking about a year to process. And a year is actually on the longer end for those kinds of cases, just because things got slowed down with the pandemic, and immigration, because of social distancing and things like that, cannot process the same amount of cases that it used to. And so somebody that's going to have an interview here in the United States, either for residency or for citizenship, right now, it's about a year from the time we filed. Other cases that they have to go outside the country to complete their cases. And those cases right now are taking about 3.5 years because of the pandemic, that appointments are really behind outside the United States. Some court cases, because of the pandemic, are taking like 8 or 9 years, unfortunately. So it's going to depend on the benefit that we're requesting, what the average time is. But I would say probably we're talking probably about a 2-year process. And then let's see. Okay, so cases outside the United States. How they contact me is members who live either in the state of Oregon or in the United States. Generally, it's in the state of Oregon since my office is located here in Oregon. And so their family members will either they've worked with us before or they do a Google search and my name will come up. And so then they'll call and say, hey, I've got a family member in Mexico. I've got a family member in Australia, all over the world. And then they'll ask if we can help. And then we'll coordinate time for me to speak with that specific person. Sometimes there's time difference. And so we're maybe doing a 5 o'clock here, but it's 9 o'clock for them. And so we'll just coordinate the times because of the time difference so that we can chat. There's obviously like Zoom, so we could do Zoom meetings. Sometimes I'll do telephone calls. Sometimes those people that live outside the United States, maybe they're here on a visit. And so then I can meet with them in person. But that's generally how people outside the United States find me, is that they have the help of a family member who lives in the area and either knows me because we've worked with them. What skills would help someone most is, so that one is going to go back to communication, as I've been talking about. Communication, there's just going to be a lot that needs to be explained either verbally so that somebody knows how to get through the process, or it's going to be written because I'm explaining to immigration why my client qualifies for the benefit that we're requesting, or presenting an argument that the officer can decide either 50-50. They could say yes or no, as I'm presenting an argument as to this is why you should side on the yes side and approve my client, because these are the things that are positive about their case. Or if they happen to have a negative, how do we address and be honest? But at the same time, we don't want to draw too much attention, or we don't want to make it seem bigger than it is. And like I said, most of my arguments are presented in writing, so I'll have to address something. So maybe somebody got in trouble, and they mistook something from a store and now they have a theft charge. Ago, or is that something that happened 12 years ago? People make mistakes all the time, and so we can show that a person has stayed out of trouble, and therefore that one incident 12 years ago shouldn't be used against them. And so communication is the biggest one, is knowing how to write and present these arguments, and also knowing how to verbally explain them to people. How much does each case cost? So with regard to cases, there is the attorney cost, like what people pay me to do versus what they're paying immigration. So the government fees, those are set. There's a whole process the government has to go through in order to set those amounts. And so we don't have any control over those. There are some benefits that if people are in a financial hardship and can't afford them, there's a form we fill out to ask for them to waive that fee, meaning the person does not have to pay the fee for that application or benefit. I am a private attorney, and so I charge for the work that I do. That's how I pay myself. That's how I pay my staff. That's how we pay our rent, et cetera, et cetera. Some immigration attorneys do things on a flat fee. So it's like if you're asking to become a citizen, I'm just going to charge you one set amount, no matter how much time I put into your case. I charge based on the time that I spend. So if I'm working on a case for 5 minutes, I'll charge for 5 minutes. If I work on a case for 2 hours, I'll charge for 2 hours. And most attorneys in general, that's how there's 3 ways that attorneys will charge, whether it's a divorce or immigration or criminal, is they will either charge just one lump sum for the whole case. They'll charge based on the time that's spent, or what they call a contingency fee. So they only get paid if they win the case. And those are generally like car accident cases where they're trying to get money back from the insurance. And so the attorney would get paid a percentage of what they got back from the insurance company. And it's a personal decision how an attorney wants to run their office and how they want to accept payment from their client. I have just found, based on the fact that each case is so different, the amount of time that goes into them varies from case to case, that it's best for my practice to charge based on the time. And so that being said, A simple case can cost as low as like maybe like $600 to like maybe renew a DACA, which is an immigration benefit for people that were brought to the United States as young people. And so that might cost about like $600 worth of attorney work to renew that versus a case where they maybe have some criminal history or multiple immigration violations. Those cases can cost close to $10,000 of just attorney work. Let's see, how long is the schooling to become an immigration attorney? So the schooling is basically to become an attorney. And to become an attorney, a person needs to have a bachelor's degree. And then because the bachelor's degree is a requirement to get into law school. And then law school is generally 3 years. It can be 4 years. And then after law school, a person would sit for the licensing exam, which we call the bar. Each state has a different bar. So an exam you have to pass. So if you want to practice in Oregon, there's one test. If you want to practice in New York or Missouri, those are different tests that you would have to pass. And so immigration is federal. So as long as you're licensed in any of the 50 states, you can practice anywhere in the United States. You're not limited to just that state. If you were going to do something like family law or criminal law, you would be limited to where you're licensed. So I'm licensed here in Oregon, so I would only be able to practice criminal or family law in the state of Oregon. Because I have been an attorney as long as I have been, I can pay a certain amount of fees and do some classes in order to get my license in, say, the state of Washington if I wanted to. People that are new attorneys, like they're just out of law school, they would have to take, if they wanted to practice in Washington and practice in Oregon, they would have to take 2 exams, one for each of those states. Like I said, immigration is federal. And so most federal areas of law, you can practice as long as you're licensed in any of the 50 states. So that could take as long as people need to, as far as going to undergrad. Generally it's 4 years, but if they need longer, and then law school's 3 years. But again, if people need more time to complete that, they can take longer. I took 7 years to complete that, and then I got my license to practice law. Learning immigration specifically, you can take a specific course in law school to learn about immigration, or people can learn as they go. I was fortunate enough to learn like under a mentor, somebody who had experience in it that was teaching me the different areas. I think that it's important to learn with a mentor, somebody that has experience, because you don't know what you don't know. And so somebody that's been doing that area of law for a while can explain, oh, here's some pitfalls, or here's some things you should know, or you should research, so that you're fully prepared, that you may not know necessarily because you just didn't know that that was something to focus on. And so learning immigration, there's no set time. Like I know people that graduate law school, get their license, and they jump right in, like immediately after. I know other people that maybe they wanted to intern at a law firm for like a year or two to become familiar. As long as you're licensed, you can jump in, and that requires the 7 years plus the bar exam. Do prices differ for a potential client? So going back to the way I charge, it's based on time. Generally, my hourly rate is set for everyone on a case-by-case basis. As I get to know or talk to these people, and maybe they do have some financial hardships, I will work with individuals on an individual basis to perhaps lower my hourly rate. If it's not a case that I feel comfortable lowering my hourly rate, I do refer out. There are a number of good immigration nonprofits where they charge based on somebody's income, or they charge lower amounts just in general because they have grants from the government that help fund their offices. How many hours do you work a day? So the office is open from 8:30 in the morning to 5:30, and we're closed an hour for lunch. I do take work home with me. And so I probably work an extra like maybe hour to 2 hours after we're closed. And I do work on the weekends. And part of it just depends on if we're on any deadlines. Do we have enough bills for the month to make sure that we're going to have a steady income? And so I would say I probably work on average about 60 hours a week at least. And that's kind of on a slow week. So as far as having flexibility in hours, part of that is going to depend on what kind of area of law. Do you work by yourself? Do you currently work in an office? I have my own office. I'm the only attorney in my office. I have one paralegal staff who helps me, but everything has to go through me. So I do things that are not necessarily attorney work versus working in an office. Like before, I worked with the bigger office where I was one of like 15 attorneys. And so we had multiple paralegal staff. We had an office manager. We had an HR person running the office that I didn't have to take care of. All I had to focus on was working with the clients and attorney work. As a small office, a sole practitioner, meaning I'm by myself, I do a lot of the business management as far as making sure bills goes out, collecting income, making sure that human resource stuff is taken care of. So I do a lot of that myself. So that adds to my workload as far as the time I spend working. Do you ever work on a case that is emotionally draining? I do. So there are these cases that, like I said, I'm really getting into people's history. So I'm learning about their childhood. I'm learning about maybe some abuse that's happened to them or some bad things that have happened to them. And I'm helping them prepare a statement. I'm helping them learn how to talk about it so they can explain it to an immigration officer. And it's really easy to take on somebody else's kind of like pain or trauma as you're working in it. I've had times, especially where I have like hard case after hard case. So I feel like I'm just only dealing with negative facts, and that can be hard for myself. And so the way that I deal with that is I have my own support system outside of work to take me out of work, to remind me that I have things in life that are positive, and that the work that I'm doing is good, that I'm genuinely helping people. I have resources to make sure that my own mental health is okay. So I have people I can talk to, help me process my own personal emotions, or process my clients' information so that I'm not taking it personally and making it my own story and having it impact me in a negative way. So I just make sure that I have healthy outlets so that I'm not taking all of that, like that pain and that hardships on myself and making it my own. And I've had to learn what works for me over the years. I tend to be a pretty private person. And also with regard to attorney-client information, everything's confidential. So I can't give names or specific information because that's against the rules. And so I've just had to learn what's going to help as far as process so that I'm not, it's not draining me. It's not taking away my energy or my ability to think and to be creative, those kinds of things. And so it's been trial and error, sometimes just talking either with a, confidant or a counselor, or sometimes it's just journaling for me, or sometimes it's taking a break and doing maybe some of the funner, easier cases in between. I've just had to learn over time what's going to work for me to not take those things home with me. Is immigration attorney career competitive to get into? So the market ebbs and flows with regard to what, how many people you're competing against. So I would say in the last 5 years here in the Portland area, we've seen an increase in the number of immigration attorneys kind of pop up. And so there's definitely a lot of attorneys to choose from. And so part of it is, do you know your craft? Do you know the law? Are you able to explain it? And getting a little bit of experience under your belt so that you stand out. And also finding, so I have the benefit of the fact that I've been here for 10 years. So I have people that are referring repeat clients that I helped them maybe 5 years ago. And so they're coming back, or they're referring their family and friends. So I've been around long enough that I now have a reputation. So people know to come to me. But if you're starting out new, it's just getting your name out there, going to, I've given know your rights talks, or just basic immigration 101 talks. I've done things like this. I've gone to conferences and, given a talk on different areas of immigration. So part of it is just getting exposure, so other attorneys know me, so other clients and people in the community know me, so that I end up being their go-to person. And that's part of establishing a new firm, whether it's immigration or criminal or family law, is getting that exposure so people know who you are and know what kind of area of law that you want to practice in. Also networking, getting to know other people in that field, picking their brains. So we're currently in a season right now in the Portland market where a lot of attorneys, immigration attorneys, have been around for 30 something years. They're all getting ready to retire. And because I've created a reputation and created a relationship with these people, as they're getting ready to close their offices, they're referring their clients to me. Not only to me, but to me and maybe 2 or 3 other attorneys, but they feel comfortable with me and the work that I do to refer their clients to me as they're closing down their businesses, or they're not taking on new cases. So, and that's happening because I've created those relationships with talking with those people over the years, that they feel comfortable with the work that I produce and the way that I treat my clients. So yeah, right now the Portland market is getting kind of competitive because we are seeing more and more new attorneys, immigration attorneys pop up. However, like I said, there's definitely a way to kind of stand out and get your name known by taking those extra steps. And sometimes that's going to require more work. So it's going to take, when I give my presentations, it's usually outside of business hours, or it's during my business day. So I've got to make up that work time, after hours. And so that's some of the work that people will do with a startup or getting their name out there, is you got to put in the extra work at the front end. So now I'm not worried about clients. I've got people coming to me or referring to me because I did that work 5-10 years ago. So that's definitely something to be aware of. If you work with a firm, then the firm's established and the firm's bringing people to you. And so then you have an influx of clients and they'll start to know your name on a regular basis as well. So if you decide to go on your own, your name and your reputation will be out there. What advice to students that want to go to law school? I recommend I recommend 2 things. I recommend taking some time off between undergrad, at least a year between undergrad and law school. I did not do that. I went straight through because I was just determined to be done with law school and my education portion of things. However, it was a lot. I got burnt out definitely towards the end of law school because I didn't have that break. And so I think of taking a gap year would have been good, just to have that transition between going to school full time and then jumping into law school full time and working full time. So that's one thing I recommend. The other thing that I recommend is, if people are really interested in becoming an attorney, is find someone who's working specifically in the area of the law that you want, whether it's criminal, whether it's insurance, whether it's litigation, trial work, appellate work. Find somebody that's doing that and ask if you can't shadow them or spend some time, or even maybe getting an internship at a law office to see what it is that they actually do on a regular basis. Law school is a lot of time and it's a lot of money to invest. I know a lot of people that went through law school and at the end of the day, they decided they didn't want to be attorneys. And so now they're working in careers that had nothing to do with the law. But that was definitely a lot of time and money that they spent getting their law degree. So I do recommend just seeing what a day in the life looks like of somebody that's doing what you want to do. And I recommend that whether you want to be a dentist, whether you want to be a CEO, whether you want to be, an actor, like getting, what does the life really look like? Because it's very easy to like sensationalize a certain career and think, oh, I'm going to have a lot of money, or I'm going to be able to be super creative, or things like that. But I think it's important to see the whole picture. So some people may be making, higher end money, but they don't have any personal time. So they can't go on vacation, or they can't spend time with their family. There's other people that maybe they have more freedom to do those things, but they don't have maybe as high of an income. Or people might realize that like, oh, I thought I was going to go to court all the time. And I only go to court maybe once every 6 months. And so knowing that aspect of things, or I never wanted to go to court and I'm in court all the time. So just learning kind of those day-to-day things. What kind of, stress do they have to deal with? Is that normal stress, or is it just, just maybe for short periods of time? Like I know right now, because we're in tax season, CPAs are very, very busy, but they're generally busy at the beginning of the year, and the tail end, they have a lot more time to do other things. Is that a lifestyle that you would want, to have 6 months where you have to grind and do all the work, and then having 6 months where you have a lot more freedom in your time and what you can do? If you want something steady, where you know what you can count on, 5 days a week, and that your work is going to stick to that 40 hours a week. It's not going to overflow into your weekends or your nights. And so I really do recommend taking the time to speak with somebody in the area that you're interested in, and what kind of life do they have? Is that the kind of life do you want in 5-10 years? And it's not just work life, but it's like their personal life. What does that look like? Or is that really what you want? Because for some people, they're like, this takes up way too much time. I don't do anything else but work. And they don't recommend it, or there's a different way they would recommend it. Or you know what, there's a balance. I have a balanced life. I do work a lot, but I have created a balance where I have time to spend with my loved ones, or to do stuff that's fun, things like that. But I've had to really work to have that balance so that my life isn't all work. So those are the two things that I would recommend for somebody that was considering law school, because it's definitely a big commitment, and to learn after the fact that it's not what you want to do. If you can prevent that, I definitely recommend that people attempt to do that, to learn in advance. Any other questions with regard to that?
All right. If you have more questions, just put it in the chat. Otherwise, we'll have attorney Danielle go, because she's so busy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording, and